Hey everyone, my name is Nathan. I'm back again for another first time watch video. This time I'm talking about my 10 favorite Criterions I saw in 2021. Now this is coming from a pool of 37 movies I saw from the Criterion Collection, and I'm choosing only 10 to talk about. So you can imagine it's a little hard to choose your favorites. But at number 10 I have Phoenix, directed by Christian Petzold. This is actually a fairly newer film. It's a really intriguing plot too. It's about this lady who lives during World War II, and she lived in a concentration camp, survived the concentration camp, but because of wounds that she inflicted during that time, she had to get a facial surgery to the point where she's not even recognizable anymore. She returns home to her husband, and her husband doesn't even recognize her. And there's more story than that, but it's crazy enough to know that she knows that he doesn't know that she's alive, and she even interacts with him and everything. I don't want to go into the story too much, but it was a very intriguing story, a bit of a slow burner, but it never bored me because the plot was intriguing enough. At number 9 I have F for Fake, directed by Orson Welles. Now this is a documentary, perhaps one of the best documentaries I've ever seen just because of the way it is presented. It's not your standard, let's interview some people here and there. It's a hybrid of both documentary filmmaking where there are interviews in front of the camera, but then there's also just genuine real footage of things happening. Like for an example, you see Orson Welles order a steak at a restaurant while he's in the middle of a conversation with people. Little things like that where it just feels very real the whole time. And it's ironic I say it feels real because the whole entire documentary is about forgery. The documentary is also very good at portraying stories that are fake and diving into these stories of forgery. It was just entertaining to me, and it for sure stood out as a highlight Criterion of the year. At number 8, I have a movie that I had been wanting to watch for a long time, and it was actually my 1970s 25 movie challenge that finally brought me to it. It is Stalker, directed by Andrei Tarkovsky. I'm vaguely familiar with Tarkovsky's work. I have seen Solaris and Ivan's Childhood, and he's on a good streak because I enjoyed this movie a lot. It's a very heavy movie with so much to unpack. In fact, in my Letterboxd review, I mentioned my on the surface level thoughts on the movie, my opinions, but at the same time, I feel like I still haven't formed a complete opinion about it. I do know that I like it, but there's just so much heavy content to unfold. It's not one that I just can easily decide on with one watch. But for now, the one watch was impactful enough and significant enough to be my number 8. At number 7, I have History is Made at Night, directed by Frank Borzage. I was intrigued by this because of the beautiful artwork design, as well as it being directed by Frank Borzage, a director who also directed one of my favorites, The Mortal Storm. I watched the movie, and I won't lie, the beginning part and even the middle part kind of just felt like an average romance film from the 30s. But as the film progressed, it turned more and more into its own distinct signature movie, with plot points that I wasn't expecting, directions I didn't see coming, different things happening to characters that I didn't predict. And overall, History Has Made at Night was just a very enjoyable watch because it felt like it stood out in the crowd of 1930s romance films. If you're intrigued enough by the cover art, then I suggest watching it because the cover art is very true to the movie and to the story. I really appreciated the cover even more so after I watched the movie. At number 6, I have Safety Last, directed by Fred C. Newmeyer and Sam Taylor. It stars Harold Lloyd as the boy. Harold is literally his character's name, and you guys are all probably familiar with this movie if you've delved into the Criterion Collection or just classic cinema in general because of the iconic scene when he climbs the tower and he's on the clock is bending, it's breaking, very suspenseful stuff. That's at least all that I knew when I went into the movie because I had seen clips of it through the years. But the movie itself, not only is it great because of that iconic scene and how just well made it is, but also it's just very funny too. This was the first Harold Lloyd movie I saw, and I think it was a great start to his filmography because it showed me what kind of characteristics I can expect from the guy. I found that in his movies, he has a lot of situations where he's in a bind or is in a sticky situation and he does something really spontaneous and on the spot that you would have never thought of, but when he does it, it just lands every time. He's strategic and he's a problem solver, and at the same time, he's funny at what he's doing too. So you can imagine Safety Last was very enjoyable and funny too. At number 5, I have a movie directed by Billy Wilder that I watched for my filmography video of his for the year 2021. That movie is Ace in the Hole. Ace in the Hole was kind of like History Is Made at Night, where the movie began, and as it kept going, it just felt like a very basic black and white movie with some good elements here and there. But it wasn't until the film's end that I realized, wow, this is a really good movie because of the progression that the film made and the different things that happened to each of the characters. This one really does all come down to Kirk Douglas's performance and his character of Chuck, who really will just do anything to get that news story. My friend Jackson has always compared it to Night Nightcrawler, the Jake Gyllenhaal movie, and I think that's a great comparison because they're both about two reporters who have that greed and who want the spotlight. That's exactly what Ace in the Hole is, and so if you're a fan of Nightcrawler, I highly recommend watching Ace in the Hole. At number 4, I have A Night to Remember, directed by Roy Ward Baker. This movie is kind of a joke on my channel because for years I joked about how I'm never going to pick it up in the Criterion sale. It's that movie that you see every time during the sale, but you never pick it up because you're like, all right, I'm just going to buy it next time. It's going to be here next time. It's an iconic movie in the Criterion Collection, so I don't need it right now. And finally, one day I bought it. In fact, I think I bought it in like 2020, but I finally watched it in 2021. I did a great double feature where I watched this one and Titanic in the same day. Really crazy day. But this one really just impressed me a lot. The fact that they made this in 1958 and they were able to create such a big monumental movie with the Titanic, the way that they shot it, the way that they showed the water flooding the ship, I just really appreciated it. I will say that there are things to love from both Titanic movies I have seen. I love both of the movies, but this one in particular I appreciated because it didn't so much focus on the characters like James Cameron's version did. This one more so focused on the event of the sinking, which was really cool because it was less about feeling for people and it was more about feeling for just the historical event, if that makes sense. Of course, it was still really sad to watch. I mean, so many people died, and it's a very historical moment in our timeline, but I appreciated this one because it focused more on the ship sinking and about the events leading up to the ship sinking. At number 3, I have Sweet Smell of Success, directed by Alexander McKendrick. This is another movie that I had owned in my collection for quite some time, but had never given it a watch, and finally, for Noirvember, I turned it on and I was floored by it. From the moment it begins to the moment it ends, Sweet Smell of Success is a perfect movie. The first 45 minutes or so all take place in one night. You're just out in the town with these characters, seeing the different things that go on in this lively city at night. And then the second half of the movie, the last 45 minutes or so, is all about the day after and the effects of what happens the night before. It's accompanied by my favorite performance I've ever seen of Tony Curtis. I think he did great here. It's also very similar to Ace in the Hole in the sense that these guys, he's a journalist, he works for the press. He's really just trying to get the next best story. Burt Lancaster is also in this movie and he does great as well. He's very intimidating too. He's good at playing this intimidating role. The reason I loved this movie so much was not so much for the actors, but more so for just the story and the writing. This is some of the best writing I have seen, probably the best writing I've seen all year from any movie. I was just really impressed with how everything flowed so smoothly throughout the runtime, how the dialogue between characters was just so snappy and so noir-esque. It just was so well put together. I loved it. I try not to do repeats of similar categories. So like for an example, if I have one movie directed by Frank Berzaghi, we'll just use that as an example, I don't want to do another one because it's like I already recognized him. I'm going to break my rule here though, because at number 2 I have The Freshman, directed by Fred C. Newmeyer and Sam Taylor once again. This is another movie with Harold Lloyd, and that's where I'm breaking my rule because I have 2 Harold Lloyd movies on this list. But what can I say? I love the guy. The Freshman is probably my new favorite silent film. It just provided me with so many funny moments, and that's exactly what I'm wanting when I watch a comedic silent film. The iconic scene in Safety Last is the clock scene, of course, but the iconic scene in The Freshman is definitely the football game towards the end. It lasts 10-15 minutes or so, and it is just non-stop entertainment. These were the moments where I was the happiest, where I was laughing the most. I might have even been clapping a time or two. It was just a really enjoyable, feel-good movie. Harold Lloyd is just so funny too. I love that he doesn't necessarily look like a silent film star, but yet he works so well in this era. I don't know if that makes any sense, but those are just some of the thoughts I have. And coming in at number 1 as my favorite first-time Criterion watch for 2021, I have A Raisin in the Sun, directed by Daniel Petrie. This movie is fresh on my mind, and I want to make sure that that's not the only reason that it's number 1 on the list, but after comparing it to my number 2 and number 3 especially, I just do like this one the most. This one gave me everything I love to see in a movie. It gave me a story of characters that I really do care for, that I want what's best for them, and so therefore anything bad that happens to them makes me feel so much more connected to them. In addition to that, it was backed up by great performances by all the characters, and so not only do I care for them, but they're able to convince me why I should care for them in the first place, and why I'm so worried about their future, and what's going to happen to them next. And so the fact that they were able to hit on all those levels, for me, that's what made it so good. That's what makes me love a movie so much, when they're able to hit on all those levels of just getting me involved with a story. It stars Sidney Poitier, which is One of my new favorite actors of all time. He gives one of his best performances here as well. Maybe even his best performance I've seen. Just really good here. It's cool because this movie's based on the play by the same name, same story and everything, and a lot of the actors from that play are the actors that are in this movie, namely Sidney Poitier and Claudia McNeil, who plays his mother. But the movie's all about poverty, about this African-American family living in a small apartment in the 1960s. They don't have much going for them. They're very much so banking on a check that they're going to receive for their father who has passed away. His life insurance check is coming to them, and they're going to be able to use that money. The whole story wraps around basically looking towards the future and hoping for a better tomorrow. Now, of course, African Americans in the 1960s, there is racial situations included in this movie. Some that make you want to slap characters in the face because it's so frustrating. But through it all, Sidney Poitier's performance and all their performances are so well done. Had this movie not had the actors and actresses that it had, it would not have been number one. It would not have been my favorite Criterion watch of 2021. And so that's a big props to them. I always love it when I watch a Criterion movie and right after I finish it, I go straight to the supplements because I was so impacted by it that I want to know more about the filming of it and the behind the scenes. And that's exactly what I did with The Raisin in the Sun. Now, if you're looking for suggestions for the next Criterion sale, I would recommend any of these 10. If you want to see my complete list of every Criterion I watched, go ahead and click the link in the description below where I have my letterboxd list of all 37 movies I watched in 2021. I want to hear your guys' favorite Criterion watches of 2021. I love getting recommendations for the Criterion Collection because it's a never-ending fun experience of just discovering new movies that you would have never known about had they not been on the collection. So please leave your comments below. I want to hear them. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.